Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and I want to thank Vice President Biden for convening this middle-class task force focused on revitalizing American manufacturing. It's a subject of vital concern to all of us in the administration, as well as all those gathered here this afternoon. In America, manufacturing has long been a vital source of innovation and, most importantly, good family wage jobs. In fact, total compensation for the average manufacturing employee is 22% more than the average service sector worker. And that manufacturing employee is more productive than ever before. Today, if our country's manufacturing sector were the sole measure of America's economy, we would still represent the 9th largest economy in the world. Even so, we cannot ignore the fact that the share of manufacturing jobs in our economy has been declining for decades, due to many structural factors, but also due to a misplaced belief in some quarters that America just didn't have to bother making things anymore. To grow our economy, we must revitalize and reimagine America's manufacturing base, and that's what this administration is committed to doing. At the Commerce Department, we're working every day to jumpstart manufacturing with programs to improve manufacturers' efficiency and sustainability, and therefore, if they're profitable and viable, they'll hire more people. We have programs to help unlock the potential of promising new markets like clean energy, and we have programs to expand exports of American-made goods by increasing access of U.S. companies to foreign markets all around the world. I'm excited to be here today, and I look forward to a very vibrant discussion. And now I'd like to turn it over to our Labor Secretary, Hilda Solis.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Secretary Locke, for that introduction. I'm also honored to be here today with my fellow members of the White House Middle Class Task Force to reaffirm the Obama administration's commitment to a strong manufacturing sector as a vital part of both the American economy and the rebuilding of the American middle class. We're making investments in our workforce, in our infrastructure, and basic research and development to help lay the foundation for a renewal in American manufacturing. As the Secretary of Labor, I'm working to ensure that all Americans have access to good jobs, including the next generation of manufacturing jobs. Over the next few months, we'll continue to roll out $500 million in green job training grants from the Recovery Act, paving the way for America to become a leader in the manufacturing of green and innovative products. Now is the time for America to seize the opportunity for a clean energy economy. These investments, as you know, will help American workers regain their footing and put them on a path towards the middle class with sustainable careers. That's why our focus on manufacturing is so important, because it's about helping the middle class. Our Vice President understands this. The last time we were together, he said, and I quote, "A strong middle class equals a strong America. You can't have one without the other." And I couldn't agree with him more. We've done a lot of good work so far with the task force, and I'm delighted that the Vice President is willing to kick off this important conversation about renewing American manufacturing. He knows that manufacturing jobs are good middle-class jobs, and he knows a renewed commitment to manufacturing is very critical as we work to create the 21st century economy that works for everyone. There is no stronger advocate for the revitalization of manufacturing than our very own Vice President. It is now my honor to introduce Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Secretary Locke, Secretary Solis, and thank you, Larry Summers. Larry is sort of the both the sort of the intellectual engine of this whole operation, and I appreciate being able to work so closely with him. Folks, you know, there's an old expression attributable to G.K. Chesterton, the English essayist. He said that it's not that Christianity has been tried and found wanting, it's that it's been found difficult and left untried. Well, it's not that we have tried in the last 15 years to focus on manufacturing. It's been found very difficult and it's been left untried. but we're going to try. That's why we have so many of you business leaders around here. We understand at the outset, I want to make it clear, the government is not picking winners and losers. The government cannot revitalize the manufacturing base of the United States of America. We can get out of the way, we can provide seed money, we can help, but it's all of you, business and labor, who are going to see that happen. And I think it's really important to point out, although we in no way eschew service jobs, they're critically important to the economy and a major, major piece of our economy and future economic growth. But it's kind of hard for me to fathom how we're able to provide the kind of middle-class lifestyle and middle-class jobs without a revival in manufacturing in the United States of America. And so I'd say that we no longer are going to rely on an economy that only is or primarily viewed as promoting service jobs, which are critically important. President Obama and I fundamentally disagree with those who suggest that that's where the future lies. By combining the most talented workforce, the most entrepreneurial business instincts in America, the best universities in the world, with seed capital from the government, I don't understand why we can't once again produce cutting-edge technology that will create the 21st century jobs that are here in America, not abroad. We have strong competitors. Usually we respond to competition. We respond to competition and do better. There's no reason why we can't do better, why we can't produce what the world wants to buy. You know, there's I used to ride Amtrak all the time as a senator for a number of years. And when you take Amtrak going north and you go across the Newark River, there is an old railroad bridge and it has a sign on it. That's the paint is fading. It says, "Newark makes what the world takes." We got to start making what the world takes. And you all in this room are the folks who know how to do that. You know, we firmly believe that we can provide some of the seed capital and ideas to help spur what all of you are fully capable of giving life to. That's why in February we passed into law the Recovery and Reinvestment Act, which invested more than $100 billion in innovation, in health information technology, high-tech classrooms, a smart electric grid, high-speed rail lines, more energy-efficient homes, more fuel-efficient cars. Now we need to accelerate that work and make sure that the investment in the future turns into jobs for the future. And that's why today we're proud to announce the administration's framework for revitalizing manufacturing, a series of policies that we hope will help create the next generation of American manufacturing jobs and secure our competitiveness in the 21st century. To do that, we need to increase competitiveness of American companies. And one of the things we've learned in recent years is that competitiveness is made. It is not inherited. In the Recovery Act, we took an important first step, in my view, a step forward in creating a tax credit for firms that build and equip factories in the United States that manufacture products related to wind energy, solar energy, battery efficiency, advanced transportation components, advanced energy transmissions. It's got a complicated name. It's called Section 48C, Advanced Energy Manufacturing Tax Credit. But the idea is, quite frankly, very simple. If we're going to lead the world in production of clean energy, shouldn't we build our capacity to make wind turbines, solar panels, and other components that are going to go into clean energy production? Well, it turns out that our tax credit has been an overwhelming success. We receive many more qualified applications than we have the money to fund. And that's why today, as part of our framework, we're proposing a $5 billion increase in funding for this initiative, tripling the investment we made through the Recovery Act, creating jobs in the short term, and leveraging private investment for long-term growth. We're talking about at least a $15 billion total capital investment by bringing private capital off the sidelines and creating tens of thousands of new construction and manufacturing jobs. We've seen similar examples in the Recovery Act investments already. Solyndra in California received $535 million in loan guarantees to manufacture innovative photovoltaic panels, which has helped stimulate a private investment of $300 million so far. The 123 Systems in Michigan builds longer-lasting batteries, and they've received nearly $250 million in Recovery Act grants and an equal amount in private financing and private funding so far. And 2 U.S. companies will be among the top suppliers of smart grid technologies to companies selected for the Smart Grid Awards. It's Itron is one, for example. It's expanding in South Carolina, putting together a manufacturing facility where smart meters are made. And SEL is preparing for increased orders and manufacturing plant in Pullman, Washington, in Washington State. And nationally, smart grid grants were matched more than 1-to-1 by private investment. Federal government put up $4 billion. Private investment in these tough times came up with $5.7 billion, translating to a $9.7 billion in smart grid projects, stimulating orders and creating jobs and stimulating more investment. Taken together, these investments help lay the foundation for a strong, vibrant, green manufacturing industry in the United States, one that can provide products that are in demand not only here, but abroad. And beyond that, our framework outlines 7 additional priority areas. I'll mention only one: investing in the creation of new technologies and business practices. Now, if we're able to build this framework for success, there's no reason why American manufacturers can't once again create stable, good-paying jobs you can raise a family on. There's no reason why our reconstructed auto sector can't once again produce cutting-edge automobiles that can dominate the world market over time. There's no reason why our idle factories can't throw open their doors and welcome new industries that are building those renewable energy infrastructures. There's no reason why U.S. firms can't capture a global market share in solar technology, in wind power, the smart grid, advanced batteries, nanotech, biotech, advanced medical devices, robotics, cyber production systems, and other innovative goods that we can't even imagine today. Where is it written that says we can't do that? I don't get this. I don't get it, how it's taken in so many sectors that somehow those new industries are going to be generated from abroad. We can breathe new life into a sector that has been beaten down, and we're determined to do it. And I know it. It's already started. I've seen it. Just a couple of months ago, in my home state of Delaware, a General Motors plant that employed up to 4,000 people at its peak on a daily basis, but had 1,700 employees at the time, shuttered its doors, eliminating almost 2,000 jobs that were the kind of jobs with a blue collar you could live on, raise a family on, have health care, live in a decent neighborhood, actually have a vacation, build our lives around. Well, it was a sad day when those doors were shuttered, but I didn't show up last month to mourn the end of that factory. I was there to celebrate a beginning. Thanks to the Department of Energy loans and the Recovery Act grants for vehicle electrification and an innovative company called Fisker Automotive, the plant was reopened in order to start producing the next generation of plug-in hybrid vehicles in America that get 100 miles to the gallon. I love this story. I love this story because not because of my home state, not because the workers, many of whom I knew as kids growing up, who lost those jobs, not just because they're getting those jobs back, because they're going to hire back 2,000 people, not because of the inspirational story that it's all about, but what happened? We came up with less than $500 million, and they went out and risked another $1.5 billion. They went out in the markets. They got the money. That plant is open. And God willing, that plant's going to begin to lead the way in new technologies, new automobiles, new creative automobiles, new automobiles people can afford. They're going to have a significant impact on our ability to regain market share around the world. It's going to take a while. We've been a long time in doing a lot of this. Look, I hope that with today's framework, we're going to be in a position where we're going to be able to do a lot more of what we've just begun. I don't want to overstate this. What we've done so far hasn't, just barely broken the ice. We got a long, long way to go. But I absolutely believe, maybe it's my, as one of my critics said, my sense of American exceptionalism, for which I do not apologize. I just do not understand, having traveled the world so many places and so many times, why it is that we can't, once again, lead the world in manufacturing. I don't believe that. I believe it's totally within our capacity to do that. And I want to make it clear. We understand, we are realistic. We understand that this government should not and is not going to be picking winners and losers. We are not a planned economy. We're not suggesting that. We are not suggesting that the answer to us being able to get there will be through federal dollars. But federal seed dollars and a long-term commitment to encourage the behaviors and the manufacturing sectors we're talking about today, I believe will have a catalytic impact on whether or not we're going to get in the game and get off the sidelines. You guys and women are the ones who are going to be doing it. We need your help. We need your advice. We need your innovation. We need your ingenuity. We know it's you. We know you're going to be the ones that are going to be taking the ultimate risks. And you're going to be the ones that are going to be providing the ultimate product. And so part of the purpose of this meeting today, led by my two colleagues and by Larry Summers, is to give us your input. Give us your input. What do you think we should be doing? We'll tell you what we think we should. We'll tell you what we've done, what we plan on doing, but we'd like to hear from you. Because again, I just think I can't ever think of a time in American history when the American public has been challenged, when they've been given a fair and a fighting chance, they've ever failed. Again, I know that sounds like so much of American exceptionalism, but I just think it's history. It's the story of the journey of our past. I think it's also a big part of our future, and so does the president. So thank you all very much for being here. I apologize. I was in the Situation Room talking about another issue, foreign policy issue, and I apologize for being late. I know how busy you all are, including my colleagues in the cabinet. So thank you very much, and I'm going to leave you to your devices, and hopefully this is the beginning of a realistic, conscious, and consistent path toward reestablishing a manufacturing base for future technologies here in the United States. Thank you all very, very much.
Structuring the automobile industry, and now has been asked to take on a leadership role, helping to coordinate the administration's efforts across manufacturing generally. We also have here representatives from a variety of other agencies, XM, SBA, Department of Transportation here to discuss manufacturing. I think we probably all take as a given the importance of the manufacturing sector for the country's economic future. For some, it's a matter of the fact that relative wages are high and jobs are good in manufacturing. For others, it's a matter of the fact that manufacturing does research and development at a disproportionate rate and enjoys significantly greater productivity growth. For others, it is the nexus of manufacturing with questions of competitiveness and questions of international trade. For others, it is the backwards linkages that come from manufacturing and the fact that the shipments of manufacturing industry are substantially greater than the value added of manufacturing industry because of all of what manufacturing purchases. So one can discuss with very considerable nuance the respects in which manufacturing is important to our economic future. But I think that there's probably no one in this room who needs to be persuaded that silicon chips are more important than potato chips to our economic future, to take.
You're not picking on. I'm sorry.
Well, maybe there is someone who needs to, and we can.
We have Pringles. We have Procter & Gamble company has 33 plants in the United States.
I did not.
Pringles plants.
I did not say that Pringles were unimportant. As important as your Pringles effort would be, some would argue that the central technology to information technology might be of slightly greater importance leading into the 21st century, but it's we are, and the President insists that we are a White House that is open to the expression of all opinions, and so I certainly don't want to impose any orthodoxy. I think, though, while we've just illustrated that one can provide nuance on the reasons and respects and arguments through which manufacturing is central to our economic future, the more important question, I think, is what can be done, and what can be done that will strengthen manufacturing in ways that also strengthen the American economy. So I thought that perhaps as a way of getting the discussion started, and I'll try to make sure we range over a significant number of subjects, we might just go around the room and ask all the non-governmental participants to introduce themselves, say a sentence about where they come from, and if they could influence one public policy that bore on manufacturing with the objective of strengthening manufacturing, what that policy would be. Why don't we start over here, David?
Oh, thanks for the warning. I'm Dave Cody.
I was looking at you. I was going to start either there or there, and you were looking slightly more prepared, which is why you got the nod.
Okay.
And you were, Dave.
I'm Dave Cody. I'm the CEO of Honeywell. We're a $35 billion company, about 120,000 people, and half the sales and employees are in the U.S. We're in 4 big industries: aerospace, where we do the most sophisticated avionics in the world, but also mechanical systems like jet engines and auxiliary power units. The control systems that would really manage an entire building like this, fire detection systems, security systems, all the things that you would see go into a building. The process controls that would get used in a refinery, the process technologies that get used in a refinery or a petrochemical plant. We make nylon, fluorines, and turbochargers. So we cut across a broad swath of I'd say the manufacturing and R&D industry. And I might have more than one item that I would recommend. The first is when it comes to education, the push on math and science. And I know we talk about it and have talked about it for a long time, but I can't say that I ever really feel like we're getting off the dime as a country on really driving math and science education, grammar school, high school, and college, making sure that we understand that engineers and that capability are important to driving the productivity in the country that will improve the standard of living for all of us. As an offshoot to that, something that I would think about is when we think about our university engineering degrees, we still have a tendency to kind of drive that, it feels to me like that creativity of the engineer, that they have to be able to invent something. And really, if we think about engineering and R&D, it's really a part of an entire process that goes from marketing and understanding what the consumer or the customer ultimately needs, into engineering, into manufacturing, into sourcing, and its entire chain, a thought process that needs to be considered. And I don't really feel like that's done today. If I look at our universities, we tend to teach people to be good engineers, good technologists, but we don't really teach them how to be a part of that process and drive the lowest cost product or service that a customer actually wants. If I had to pick a second item, the Vice President mentioned green jobs. And in my view, there won't be any green jobs unless there's demand for the products and services that all these technologies we're working on turn into something. We can do the R&D work, we can develop some of this stuff, but unless you have something like cap and trade that's going to drive the demand, those jobs aren't going to be there. And if I look at despite the perceptions about China, for example, driven by some of the negotiations that are going on, when I visit China, they are very aggressively driving that demand for energy efficient products and services. And I don't see that same kind of demand here. And if we don't do something like cap and trade that drives it, I think we can invest in technologies all we want. It's not going to turn into something unless that demand is there. So sorry, I picked 2 items instead of 1, but that math and science all the way through to how do you make engineering part of a process, a design process. And secondly, I'd say cap and trade to drive the demand. I'd say those would be the 2 big ones that I'd like to add.
Thanks.
I'm Bob McDonald. I'm the CEO and president of the Procter & Gamble Company. We do about $79 billion a year in sales. Every day, about 4 billion people somewhere in the world use our products. 40% of our sales are in the United States. As I said, 33 of our plants are in the United States. We're currently in the process of building a new factory in Box Elder, Utah, which is about a $300 million investment. So we do believe in manufacturing, and we do believe in the skill of American workers, and we do believe in what we're trying to do with the new manufacturing policy. There was a lot to like, I thought, in the new manufacturing policy around the administration's belief in innovation and funding of innovation, around training and education, as Dave said, around infrastructure investments. Those are all great. We believe in those. We want to partner with those. The places where I find opportunities are in making sure we have a predictable, stable future on which business can plan. And there are a lot of legislative initiatives right now which create some uncertainty long term. Secondly, I think the trade picture is an opportunity. We make Gillette Fusion razors in Boston. We make the blades there. They're only made in 2 places in the world. Currently, we have to pay 15 to 25% duties in places like Panama and Colombia, where we have a free trade agreement negotiated since 2007, but not yet acted on. I could sell a lot more blades if we could get that free trade agreement passed, and our plants in Boston could be a lot busier. Secondly, in the area of tax policy, and Larry, you and I have had this discussion before, we have a very high corporate tax rate in the United States. But as we've discussed before, using the tax policy to try to incent companies to build plants in the United States versus abroad doesn't make sense to us, because it would be impossible for us to make a Pampers disposable diaper in the United States and export it to China and be able to sell it. So our factories need to be close to our consumers, and 90% of what we produce in the U.S. gets used by U.S. consumers. So we think that we've got to build our factories, all 145 of them, around the consumers that we serve. But the good news is all those factories outside the U.S., 40% of our jobs in Ohio depend on those international factories. 20% of the jobs in the U.S. depend upon those international factories. So there is a knock-on effect to the American economy for even those factories, those jobs, and those products that are sold overseas. Thank you.
I'm Martin Bailey. I'm an academic at the Brookings Institution, an economist. So I'm delighted to be here, and we'll get a chance to hear what everyone from business and labor is saying. I'll make a couple of quick comments, try to make them brief. Productivity and innovation are an important part of manufacturing success. The U.S. is very good at innovation. I think that is an American exceptionalism. So that's something we need to support, but it's an area of strength. I think one of the ways to support it, and by the way, I think this document's very good, so congratulations to CEA, of which I'm an alumnus, and maybe to your supervisor, Larry, too, but this is a nice document. I think a couple of ways we can support that is, one, through investments in technology, which is mentioned here. And I think it's important to make sure that the investments follow the path of the technology and the demand, and are not sort of turned into a big project that you can stand in front of. So I do support government support of technology, however. I'll mention H-1B visas. I've lived in the United States now for 40 years, but I am an immigrant, and I think America is shooting itself in the foot by not allowing qualified people to come to the United States. I know that we haven't filled the H-1Bs this year, but that's not a big surprise with 10% unemployment. I think in the future we will do so. And then finally, on the sort of skills side, of which H-1B is a part, I like what's written here about the need to supplement skills of the workforce. I think it's very important that this administration try to partner with both business and labor to figure out how we improve the skills, because I don't think for many workers it's classroom education that really does the trick. Obviously they need a certain amount of that, but they also need on-the-job training and reinforcement of skills in the workplace. And so anything that can be done through either giving support to individuals or to companies that do that training, I think would be helpful. I'd also like to say something to the folks from labor here. I think it's sort of horrendous that it took 20 years before the U.S. auto industry learned the lessons of lean production. I think a good part of that was management that resisted change, but I think some part of it was also on the union side. I think it's would be very helpful if the union movement would not only, obviously they want to protect their workers and the benefits they have, but that they were also focused on ways to increase the efficiency and viability, economic viability of manufacturing employers in a global economy. And that should be just as important, because we're not going to get good jobs without well-skilled people. We're not going to pay good wages unless workers are productive, and that has to be a joint effort. Thank you.
I'm Stephanie Burns. I'm the CEO of Dow Corning, and amongst other advanced materials, one of the materials we manufacture is polysilicon, which does go into the computer chips. We also supply, I think, something for the potato chips, I'm not sure. Also this material is used for solar cells and photovoltaic applications. And I'll just tell a little story because I think it describes much of what I'm very supportive in your report in terms of encouraging advanced manufacturing. We announced the investment of $5 billion in the United States for manufacturing this high-purity silicon. We actually conducted a global search looking at sites all around the world and landed in Michigan and in Tennessee. And we take many, many things into account when we're looking for low-cost manufacturing sites. Labor cost is a part of it, but you have to consider the skilled labor, intellectual property protection, and I think my number one is the appropriate incentives to encourage manufacturing investment in the United States. When people like me take a look at the balance of everything, those incentives are critical. And in both states, we were able to balance that out and make the decision to invest in the United States. Now, what's frustrating about it is most of what we manufacture then gets shipped offshore and converted into solar modules, which then find their way sometimes back to America. And I agree with your comment on increasing the demand for renewable energy. Those customers of ours want to invest in the United States. They want to manufacture here. They struggle with, you know, how can we compare Malaysia or China to the U.S. with respect to low cost? And we have worked hard with those customers to help them understand what incentives are there and what we can do to attract them. And I think the good news here is we've actually now been part of attracting 3 value chain customers to invest in our communities. And there are more that we can bring into America if we work together with the right incentives. So I would say that I fully support and can comment later on the R&D, science and math education, and a skilled workforce, which we're doing a lot to partner with community schools to develop programs to retrain workers for these advanced manufacturing jobs.
Good afternoon. My name is Scott Welch from Mohawk Electrical Systems, and I clearly represent the smallest business here. We're a third-generation family manufacturing company in Delaware. We have 25 employees. But there's tens of thousands of businesses like us around the country that employ, millions of people. So we're often not seen, but we do a fair amount. What do we need? A lot rests on just a few people's shoulders in my company, so we need it to be simple. We need forms to look more like a 1040EZ form and not the 1040A with all the schedules to go with it. If we're going to apply for a grant, I don't have 3 weeks and a staff to do it. I have to do it at home, after I put my son to bed or do something like that. So we really need people to think about how they set up their programs. What I recommend, I think maybe some of the staffers who write the reports maybe should visit companies like ourselves and see how we live. It's different. I visit big companies sometimes are my customers, but we're different. We don't have a lot of staff. We don't have the ability to do things, and so we can't adjust the way, or we can't adapt to the regulations the way the big companies are. And you need to realize that when they're written, and not afterwards.
My name is Jim McGregor. I'm from Springfield, Ohio. Our family owns 4 manufacturing companies in Springfield and 1 in Aiken, South Carolina. We're in the metal stamping business and screw machine business. Before October of last year, we had 415 employees. We're down to 250 now. We had high sales of around 82 million. We're down to 55 million. I have the honor of serving on the Manufacturing Council with Secretary Locke. It has been a breath of fresh air in the new administration on that council, and I think I would have anybody from the previous administrations admit that also. They've asked very good questions, and I honestly believe they're trying to help manufacturing in America. Yesterday, we had a very important phone call with Secretary Locke and brought out some recommendations. We came up with the 2 most important actions the administration could take to create manufacturing jobs and reduce dependence, on imported oil, and to enforce existing trade rules with China for the 2 major functions. The primary strategies fall under the reduce oil imports and correct trade with imbalances with China. The supporting strategies will make a workforce development system responsive to the needs of manufacturers, and the last under supporting strategies was to eliminate business cost disadvantages. On the eliminate cost disadvantages, we spent a lot of time developing this report, and one of the keys that I personally thought came out of this report is one that probably won't be thought about today in the meeting, but I think it's important to discuss. And that is to conduct ongoing sector analysis to understand and address industry-specific competitiveness issues. It's our feeling that the Department of Commerce it's become clear that the Department of Commerce does not have a strategically focused analytical capacity to understand and address the issues of international cost competitiveness to manufacturing, either at the level of the sector as a whole or an industry by industry basis. And I want to be clear, we aren't saying they don't have a good analytical department there. I don't want Praveen to get angry with me. We're saying we want to study the competitiveness in the world market. We were asked this question as business owners and manufacturers, well, what are these issues? And unfortunately, we couldn't come up with the factual information that the Secretary could take to determine, are these issues that we talk about on a very regular basis, especially the small to medium manufacturers, when we're fighting the competition from overseas. So we recommend that the United States Department of Commerce, the U.S. trade representatives, the ITC, and other parties of the federal government collaborate to develop this capacity and conduct an ongoing analysis and reporting of international markets and the competitiveness of the domestic manufacturer sector, including the subsectors. Personally, I think this is critical. And, you know, another comment that somewhat relates to this, I was glad to see Scott here. He's smaller than me. I thought I was going to be the smallest guy at the table, but Scott wins that award, so I'll buy you a Coke afterwards. But as I look at where we are today, I'm very concerned for the small to medium manufacturers. And I really believe there are a lot of big corporations here in this room today. And my only request to them would be, and I fight this every day when we price out our product, my only request would be to look at what you're buying, and is there a chance that with help, that the product that you're importing could be made in America? America is in trouble today, and we need Americans to help Americans. And there's a lot going on in the international marketplace. I see it all day long. I look at the costs. I don't want to get into a big issue. My request only is let's look at what we're buying, and is there some product out there that could really be made in America in factories that are sitting at 50, 60% capacity today? Thank you.
I'm Shirley Ann Jackson, president of Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute, and that's in Troy, New York, and Hartford, Connecticut. Rensselaer is the oldest private technological university in the United States, and fully 50 to 60% of our students are in engineering. And we, of course, have been known for educational innovation and research, but we are always looking for new ways to educate future innovators and to focus them on enterprises that make things that ultimately relate to our national security, our energy security, and therefore our ultimate economic security. I also have the privilege of serving for President Obama on the President's Council of Advisors on Science and Technology, where I co-chair the Innovation and Technology Committee with Eric Schmidt of Google. And we are moving down a pathway with a specific series of studies we're going to undertake, but the first being on advanced manufacturing, as well as on the nexus of new technologies with the creation of new industries and the role of new technologies in existing enterprises. And so from both of those points of view, I guess I would like to have us focus, or at least share my understanding, that in the end what we're talking about is innovation, whether we're talking about innovation within existing enterprise or through as the basis of the creation of new enterprise, and therefore that what we're talking about is an innovation ecosystem. And so there are three key elements I would just briefly mention. The first is that we cannot lose sight of the need for support for research and development as the basis of innovation. But as we do that, we have to look at what happens at the connect points along the innovation chain from whatever, whether it's a new process development or an actual discovery or innovation, to how it goes into commercial operation, because it's usually at those connect points that advantage can be won or lost. The second, which is a broad area, is one of infrastructure. But when I speak of infrastructure, I speak of four kinds of infrastructure. One is obviously physical infrastructure. The second is financial infrastructure. The third is business process infrastructure. And the fourth, which is really relates to my business, is human capital infrastructure. Because there is no innovation at whatever level without innovators, and there is no manufacturing without well-educated, well-skilled, continually learning workers. And that says that as we look at training programs, we have to look at how they relate in terms of broad applicability, the ability of workers to adapt, and their portability. And as we look at our science and engineering talent, we have to make sure that we tap the complete talent pool. And that implies we do have to be open and make sure we remain so for the attraction of international talent. But we also have to recognize that we need to tap our domestic talent pool and ensure that we have the educational bases for being able to do that. And then the third key element is what I call the nexus of the regulatory, economic, and broader public policy framework. And that's whether we are looking at hurdles or incentives for new types of enterprises, such as new ways to make vaccines, or looking at cellular-based methodologies for testing new pharmaceuticals, to all the way to obvious tax policies that have to do with incentives or non-incentives for manufacturing here, but also for continual investment in R&D. And so I hope we have the chance to think about that, because each one of us comes from our specific framework. But if we don't think about this connectivity along the line and what happens at those connect points, they become branch points. And if we branch in the wrong direction, there's no point in having this discussion. Thank you.
My name is Bruce Rayner. I'm president of a union, Workers United, formerly Unite, 150,000 member union, manufacturing workers, distribution workers, part of SEIU, which is a 2.2 million member union. I was frightened by your first instruction to stick to one idea, but since no one else did, I'm not going to do it either. So I have a couple of thoughts that seems to me the issue is getting rid of, the Vice President said in his remarks that it's not a new subject, reviving manufacturing, and it's not. And I think one of the ways to deal with this debate is to get rid of some of the orthodoxy. And so to me, the notion of getting a couple of more trade treaties done is not going to change the plan in manufacturing. I think we've got lots of experience with trade treaties, and adding Panama and Colombia is not going to do anything to revive manufacturing. But I also think that we need to look at what has worked historically. And one of the areas I think we ought to defy orthodoxy in is government procurement, whether it's the federal government or the state, local governments are enormous buyers of merchandise, and having a policy that they do business with companies like James McGregor's small business company, as opposed to making a decision for the cheapest product wherever they can get it from. I think that's legitimate government policy. The rest of the governments in the world do it. I think an example of some degree of success in that area is we have something called the Berry Amendment in apparel, where there are 30,000 domestic workers that make apparel for the military. We added in the Homeland Security bill the Kissel Amendment, which included the Homeland Security people in the uniform, domestic uniform procurement. You know, those people that aggravate you at the airports when you're going through security. They're wearing uniforms. And even though that was to be included, the first contract that was let for Homeland Security uniforms went to a company manufacturing in Mexico. I think we need to look at government procurement. The second big area that I think we have to look at is a cheaper dollar. I think historically, the revival of American manufacturing is linked to any one thing. It's a cheaper dollar, and I think our government can have a policy that had the quickest results involving many more workers and businesses in this country by moving towards a cheaper dollar. Other governments do it, and I think our government can and should do it.
Good afternoon. I'm Ron Hall. I'm CEO of Bridgewater Interiors. We make seats for the automotive industry. 2008, we were over $1 billion company. Last year, we were at $780 million, and so we're down, but we're happy to see the ball bouncing back up a little bit as we go forward. I'd like to remind everyone that 33% of America are people of color, and 10, 15 years from now, half of America will be people of color. And I want to say there's no more General Motors or Ford or Chrysler springing up to hire a tremendous number of folk. the job growth is in small business and particularly minority businesses. And we don't think we've heard enough out of the administration about how they feel about supporting minority business. But we're at a point in our lives here in America that we need to put folks to work, and that they need to be empowered economically because we're counting on them to buy the goods and services that we're producing. So it makes good business sense for us to empower small and particularly minority businesses. We're counting on them to hire the folks. We know that minority businesses traditionally hire minority folks more so than non-minority businesses. And so it makes good sense. And I would offer up that we haven't heard much discussion about access to capital, particularly for small and minority businesses. It's a huge impediment, and we do appreciate that the President talked to the banking industry rather sternly a few days ago, but we think there needs to be some accountability as to what they're doing, what they're going to do, and their ability to accomplish that. We think that it makes good business sense to do that, and I hope we have some discussion on that.
Thank you. My name is Dan Yanka. I'm with MAG Industrial Automation Systems. We are a machine tool and factory automation company. In other words, we make the stuff that makes the stuff. And we're the largest machine tool company in North America, third largest in the world. We have operations globally, but about 50% of our total sales are here in the United States. I also represent, as chairman of AMT, the U.S. machine tool industry and automation companies. And I appreciate the comments that Scott made earlier because 3/4 of those companies are small companies, small automation companies, and so forth. And I will tell you that our industry and our company as well are absolutely committed to the United States manufacturing base as a global leader, as being #1 in the world. Our company provides the most advanced technology into the automotive industry, aerospace industry, heavy equipment, renewable energy, and so forth. And our industry couldn't survive without help and assistance in R&D. Because the R&D, you know, it all starts at the inception of the idea, how do you make something? And then how do you automate it? I just want to touch on a couple points that I don't think have been brought up just yet. First of all, before I do that, we do support the extension of the R&D tax credit, and we do support the extension of the 50% bonus depreciation for CapEx. Those are vital if you're a capital equipment supplier, as the machine tool industry is. The point I want to touch on is export control. Our industry not only supplies to the U.S., but we rely on our ability to export. And there's this misfounded mystique about machine tools. Today, they're produced worldwide. Every industrial nation in the world produces machine tools, yet we have a very difficult time exporting into some of the fastest growing markets in the world, including China and India. And we maintain a unilateral policy with regard to export control. And I will tell you, that's cost thousands of jobs in our industry sector because we're not even, as an industry, we're not even invited to the dance anymore. And in fact, the very product that we cannot ship to China, they are now exporting into the United States. And so we have some catching up to do. And it's a, you know, from my perspective, a very serious issue. The second is business visa reform. It takes an awful long time, and companies don't want to do business if it's inconvenient with U.S. companies, if they can't come to this country to buy off their product. And so I think those are two real opportunities, that again haven't been brought up yet.
Hello, I'm Dan D'Amico, Chairman and CEO of Nucor Corporation, and I want to thank you for the invite to be here today. Nucor is one of the largest steel producers in the United States and North America. Over 23 million tons of steel produced in a normal year, of which this is not, with over 20,000 employees and teammates. We are also the most diversified steel producer. We're one of the world's largest recyclers, recycling over 24 to 25 million tons of scrap metal every year in our process. And our product is 100% recyclable, which is a good thing. We are known around the world as one of the most efficient steel producers. We are known around the world as one of the leading innovators in manufacturing and in the steel industry to this day. We are also the nation's largest consumer of electricity. And we've never laid off an employee for lack of work in our entire 47-year history. And that track record is still intact. Unfortunately, today, our teammates are working 20 to 60% of their normal work week because of the crisis that we're in today in this recession. We are strong supporters of education. $3,000 a year goes to every child of every employee to go to Votech school, to go to community college, or to go to a four-year institution. Not only do the child of every employee get that, but every employee gets $3,000 a year in books and tuition reimbursement, and their spouses get $1,500 a year. So it's an example of putting your money where your mouth is in terms of supporting education and taking care of your people. I would like to commend those who've put this report together. This is an excellent report, and virtually everything in here is something that my teammates and most of the U.S. manufacturing sector can support. I do have the privilege of sitting on the Manufacturing Council for the Department of Commerce, Advisory Secretary, along with Jim. And Jim, most people would not normally confuse us with being the smallest guys in the room, but I know what you meant. If I had a wish list, and those of you who know me probably have a good idea what that wish list would be. Reading through this excellent report, I would say that my wish list would be this. Of the 7 items listed as the framework for revitalizing American manufacturing, I would take items 6 and 7 and move them to items 1 and 2. Those items would be ensure market access around the world and a level playing field upon which to compete. And I guarantee you, U.S. manufacturers will compete and we will win. And the second item would be improve the business climate, especially for manufacturing. I'm a firm believer in the philosophy of build it, it will come. Because I believe, my own experience as a young man growing up trying to figure out what the heck I was going to do, I had a math aptitude, a technical aptitude, but in the 60s, it was John F. Kennedy's Apollo program that stimulated myself and thousands of other young men and women to get into engineering at that time in our history. And today, we don't have that kind of activity that could stimulate the interest, the juices of our young people. Manufacturing has been beat down. We're a service economy. We're not going to be making things in this country anymore. That's the biggest bunch of hogwash ever sold to the American public and to the American Congress. We need to make things in this country. We are good at it. And services and the service sector will thrive based off manufacturing the way it always has. But we have to be given the opportunity to compete and not be at a major disadvantage as we are around the world today. So if I had one thing to ask of our President and our administration and of our Congress, it would be give us that level playing field to compete on, and we will win 90% of the time because we have the best technology. We know how to use it. My concern over the idea of strictly innovating to innovate without these 2 items being 1 and 2 is that we will quickly lose our innovative ideas to other countries. Not that the ideas won't be ours, but you look at where the stuff's going to be manufactured. It's happening every day. It's been happening for 20 years. We come up with the innovations, but the manufacturing is done elsewhere. Just recently, a Massachusetts company came up with a great innovation in battery technology, and they rapidly followed that up with the announcement that they can't manufacture it here, it's too costly, you're going to move it to China. I sit on several boards of directors, one of which is a utility company. Our Chinese partners want to do joint ventures together. To do a joint venture, they make it as a condition, a precondition of the joint venture, that materials that go into those power plants, into those transmission grids, are made in China. Recently, we just had a big solar farm that was going to be put in Texas, but the Chinese put a condition on it. The wind turbines will come from China. Now there's been some backup on that. I don't know if it's true or not, but I heard they were going to build a plant to make wind turbines in Texas now, which is a great thing. We have to innovate. We are one of the world's leaders in innovation. We spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on it, of our own money, but we have to make sure that when that innovation comes, we've created the conditions and the fertile ground here in this country to make the products here, otherwise we will not bring back our middle class. Thank you.
I'm Josh Bivens. I'm an economist with the Economic Policy Institute. Probably our biggest claim to fame at this point is supplying Jared Bernstein to the Office of the Vice President. In the taxonomy of sort of why manufacturing is important that Larry Summers sort of kicked off this meeting with, I take a little bit from each column, but the one that concerns me the most by far is the nexus between international trade, competitiveness, and manufacturing. And I say that because in the long run, a country has to pay its way in the world. And the way you pay your way is exporting. And exporting in the U.S. economy overwhelmingly means manufacturing. And so if you don't have a healthy sector there, you're going to have a much harder time paying your way in the world in the long run. Given that, if I had to choose a single issue facing the manufacturing sector, I think I would have to go with the value of the dollar. You know, it's a complicated issue. It's not a simple morality tale where other countries are mercantilist and bad and we are Ricardian and virtuous. But it is just true that there are many countries around the world that manage the value of the currency and achieve competitive gain against the United States. And this was once an expedient relationship for both sides of it. It's no longer in either country's interest to continue that, and so I think that's going to be a real challenge moving forward. And it's going to be, you know, manufacturing in the United States is incredibly productive. It's incredibly cost competitive on many measures. It's still swimming upstream against currency values. I should note another sort of problem with swimming upstream for so long is I think it's made private finance leery of investing long-term in the U.S. manufacturing sector. That's where I think the focus of this task force, though, is great. I mean, essentially, it's trying to lean against that. It's trying to get private finance into the sector, and that's going to yield real benefits. I mean, the stronger and more productive our manufacturing sector is, the less wrenching the eventual adjustment will have to be to make us pay our way in this world. So I think this is a very welcome thing, sort of getting private capital into the game in manufacturing. I do think it'll pay its biggest dividends if sort of the international currency regime looks better than it has for the past 10 years or so. Thank you.
Wow. I'm Jeff Turner. I'm from Kansas, Wichita, Kansas. I think I'm virtuous. I've got to go home and figure out if I'm Ricardian or not. But I represent the aviation and aerospace business. It's the heart and soul and the core of our community. We build and deliver out of Wichita, Kansas, 50% of the business jets that are built and delivered in the world. We are a manufacturing center and a manufacturing center of excellence. My company is called Spirit Aerosystems. 4.5 years ago, we were part of the Boeing company. We were divested out of the Boeing company. We have, in the past 4.5 years, gained customers around the world, some of which the work will be done in the United States, some of which the work will be done in other places in the world close to the customer. But in the last 4.5 years, we've been able to grow our manufacturing base. I have to tell you, I'm completely in awe of everybody at the table here who thinks much broader than I do. I think pretty narrowly, pretty specific about my business, my community, and how I keep jobs in the community, how I keep customers coming to us and us shipping products to them. And I agree with a lot of things that have been said. I'm not quite sure about cap and trade, because for me, cap and trade is probably a dragon at the door I don't understand. I have products in my factories that were put there The tools and processes were put there in the 60s, and they still make product for us. And we can't afford to reinvest in those products. We have very long product life cycles with our products. And then I have products in my factory that are just now going into production. In fact, the 787 flew yesterday with a lot of Spirit hardware on it, which we were really glad to see. And it's innovative product, it's innovative process, it's innovative technology, and it will be in place for the next 25, 30, 40 years, producing American-made goods and services. But to have to go back and change those processes or those designs or the chemical makeup of those things because somebody thought it was a good idea to put a cap and trade on it would very quickly put us out of, potentially put us out of business. So the only thing I would argue there is one size doesn't fit all. Longer cycle business is very different than quick cycle business in terms of when you can put innovation into product and when and how much you can afford to invest. Clearly the conversations we've had about a stable, predictable environment, free trade within bounds. We were talking earlier about we'd love to compete against. It must be Ricardian free traders must be who we want to compete against. But clearly a level playing field is incredibly important to us. Investment in technology is important to us. I too read the study and found it to be parts of it brilliant because it agreed completely with my thoughts. In fact, most of it I found very little to argue with in it. I found it as a very good framework. A couple thoughts that I'd like to maybe piggyback on. Rayner, I think, said that we have to get rid of the orthodoxy. I think that's absolutely true. Let me give you a quick anecdotal story that is steeped in the orthodoxy. It's the orthodoxy of how we manage. It's the orthodoxy of our labor contracts. It's the orthodoxy of the way that we work with our governments. The way we try, and by governments I mean city, state, local, county, federal, all of our governments. In our environment, our business is very cyclical. We'll see a swing of 50% in demand from one part of the cycle to the other. I know this particular cycle's been deeper for some and not as deep as that for others, but for us it's common. Every 5 years we go up, 5 years later we start down, and the swings can be 40 to 50% in demand. We're very set in our orthodoxy. Orthodoxy is we can't find enough workers on the upside. And so the community, the federal, state, all the governments come together to try to train enough people and encourage them to come to our community and so on. 5 years later, we have too many because the market's changed. We're now laying people off, and now all the governments rush to us to try to figure out what they can do to help us retrain workers, to give them unemployment insurance, to try to keep their lives from completely falling apart. And I've watched this my whole life, and I thought, as the CEO of Spirit Air Systems, I have to change that orthodoxy. I cannot change that orthodoxy by changing the underlying market, but maybe I can change that orthodoxy by following Dan and saying we're not going to lay people off. What I really need to do is keep 60% of them at work, or 100% of them at work 60% of the time, not 60% of them at work 100% of the time. And in order to do that, I need to retrain them while I'm doing that. But when we go and ask for retraining money, we're told the retraining money is for people who have been laid off. So if you'll lay off these people, they can get retraining dollars. But if you keep them at work 3 days a week, you can't get retraining dollars. I go talk to my friends at the labor organization, and they're driven by people who have been laid off 2 or 3 times, and now it's their turn to stay employed. So the orthodoxy has got us in this box that is driving repetitive mistakes that we continue to make. And what I'd like to see us do as a nation and with my community and companies like mine is I'd like to see us really attack that orthodoxy, attack this issue of can we incentivize people to keep people at work 60% of the time? Can we fund training in such a way that people get an extra day of training a week and maybe some stipends so that it's not so painful when adverse conditions do affect our families and our employees. Because what happens to us in our business is by the time we get back to where we can rehire them, they've gone somewhere else. Or worst case, because of that cost pressure that's on us, we've shifted the work somewhere else. And then we come back to the upswing where we're all struggling to find enough resources to meet demand. Instead of building that demand in the U.S., the demand's getting, the capacity to meet that demand, it's getting built somewhere else where we shifted it when times were so tough. So I think looking through these cycles and say, what's a policy that works both on the upside and the downside is really important to us. And workforce training and keeping that trained workforce intact is the most critical thing in our industry. These jobs will eventually go to where the trained, capable workforce is. Ultimately, they will do that. And one more quick one. Technical training. I read the report. Part of our orthodoxy is we have colleges, we have K through 12, and we have junior colleges, which are really just half colleges in many ways. Manufacturing depends on not just college grads. That's about 20% of what we need. It really, really depends on people who love to touch things and make things happen. They're very tactile, they're not cerebral, and we need tech schools. And there's parts of this world that are driving way better tech schools than we are in the U.S. We need an initiative for technical training that elevates technical training away from vocational kids who couldn't make it for college to kids that are really, really good at working with their hands. That's who we depend on in our business, and I think some others of you do as well. And they're not coming from the general studies at a college. So tech training is a huge issue in my mind.
I'm John Ferracci from International Paper. We're a $25 billion packaging and paper company. We kind of think of ourselves as a middle-class company serving middle-class customers. We've got some big customers, but most of them are medium to small-sized businesses. We have 40,000 jobs here in the U.S., 400 locations in 43 states. Many of our bigger facilities, some employ up to 1,000 people, are in small places where we're the biggest employer by far. I also agree there was a lot in the framework to support. I think there's some very good work done there and some good thinking. There's no question we need medium and long-term investments and programs to support, sustain, and create a healthy manufacturing environment, which we can have. I agree with the Vice President on that. But I think right now, you can kind of divide the problem into three buckets. What do we need to do right now? You know, not next year, but right now. What do we need to do for the short term? And then what do we need to do for the medium and long term? And I'll just focus on right now because I think that's what's really important. One of our biggest businesses is corrugated packaging. That's putting stuff in boxes. We do from bulk chemicals to bottled water, so the whole spectrum. Some of you around this table are probably a customer of ours or one of our competitors. We're the biggest corrugated producer in the U.S. by far. And all of the corrugated products, all the corrugated packaging used here in the United States gets made here. So it's not something we're battling, you know, competitor products from somewhere else. You know, demand for packaging this year will be back to 1993 levels. So we've lost 15 years of growth in 2 years when this recession started. So, you know, that's been the impact on our customers because, you know, we're in business with our customers. And, you know, two areas I think could, and I'm sure the administration has thought of these, but I think are really important. One is, let's go to where the demand is. And in our packaging board business, export demand was in the tank in the beginning of the year, is now back at record levels. What that tells me is there are parts of the world that are growing. And whether it's through the Exim Bank or other programs, we need to try to facilitate, you know, medium-sized and small businesses taking advantage of parts of the world that are growing. So, you know, that's one. The other is, and this is, I think Marty Feldstein wrote a piece on this a couple of months ago in the Journal. You know, the government's a big customer of the defense industry, and it seemed to me that I think that article suggests that there's a lot of stuff that's got to is getting worn out as we fight 2 wars around the world. It's got to be replaced. Those are kind of shovel-ready orders. You know, we got the factories, we got the jobs, we got the trained people. A lot of the work is here in the United States. It would seem to me that thinking about buying some of that stuff that's got to be replaced, whether it's tractors or trucks or tires or oil pans or engines, whatever it might be, is a way to get near-term demand going again. The second area is credit, and I'd say credit on two fronts. The credit markets now are working for large companies. International Paper couldn't go to the capital markets earlier in the year. We now can. So kind of solve that problem. But still, small to medium-sized businesses, which are our customers, can't get credit. We've got one medium-sized business that's coming to us because their credit line's getting shrunk and they're looking to us to be their bank. We really can't do that. So I think that's got to start working better. And the other is the consumer. 70% of our economy is consumer spending. Consumers clearly got to de-lever because they had too much debt. And with interest rates or mortgage rates at 40-year lows, I'm just wondering whether all the credit-worthy customers that can take advantage, should be taking advantage of refinancing opportunities, which will put money in their pocket to both pay down debt that they have, but maybe to spend some money, will stimulate consumer spending. And without the consumer getting back in the game, I think we've got a very long road uphill here because we don't have an export-led economy.
Hi, I'm Liz Schuler. I'm the Secretary-Treasurer of the AFL-CIO, a newly elected officer. I originally come out of the IBEW, the electrical workers. But the AFL-CIO, as many of you know, is an umbrella organization of labor unions. We have 57 affiliated unions, 11.5 million members. In many industries, we have professionals, we have folks in the industrial sector, service sector, from plumbers to professional athletes, so it really does range. And many of the companies represented around this table actually employ our members. So I think we're all excited in the labor movement that this task force exists, that this framework has been published. It's been something we've been talking about for a very long time, about addressing a manufacturing policy in this country. So we're very excited, supremely excited. And President Rich Trumka and our Executive Vice President Arlene Holt-Baker and I all have been singularly focused. The one word on our lips these days is jobs. Jobs, jobs, jobs. We hear it all the time. And our biggest concern, besides health care reform, of course, and Employee Free Choice Act, which are another day, is jobs. So, and not only just jobs, but family supporting jobs. With good wages and benefits, and manufacturing is at the very heart of that discussion. So as far as the report is concerned, of course, being at the tail end of this table means that pretty much everything's been said already. But I would like to tip my hat to the 48C tax credit issue, the fact that that is going to be encouraging green technology, which we're very interested in. Also the notion of training, which has been talked about. Infrastructure, can't say enough about infrastructure, and then the National Infrastructure Bank that's been touted in the framework as well. But I think now that we're beyond just picking one thing, and my strategy for that was to wrap it up into one area, a level playing field, which it's been talked about, but it actually encapsulates labor's concerns as well, because we're talking currency issues, as a level playing field issue, as Bruce mentioned and others. We're talking about trade agreements, which we would say enforcing our trade agreements is really the key issue that exists now. Ending tax incentives that incent people to locate manufacturing overseas. Access to financing was mentioned as well. And we would actually encourage the administration to lend some of those TARP funds that we've been talking about to small and medium-sized businesses, which is also being talked about on the Hill and the Warner bill. Also the issue of carbon emissions and climate change were addressed, a level playing field issue that we want to partner with our employers on. And I guess just making sure that workers have a voice in all of the issues that I mentioned in leveling that playing field for bringing more manufacturing back to the United States.
Okay, I'm Keith Lundell, and I represent Harley-Davidson. I'm sure everybody's aware of our company. We are the most iconic brand in the world. Some people take exception to that. The way we measure it is we measure it by the number of human bodies that have our company's name tattooed on them. So, I mean, there has to be a metric, right? So anyway, 1903, the company was founded in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. every single Harley-Davidson motorcycle that's ever been made has been made in America, and for the last 50-plus years with union labor. And we're proud of that. I've never been accused of having an original thought, and that'll be the case again today. I agree with Dan and Elizabeth that 6 and 7 should be 1 and 2, and I'm going to talk about this just from the microscope of our own company. It might be surprising to many of you that 1/3 of the motorcycles that we sell today are sold internationally, and yet they're manufactured in America. And yet, you know, we've had legislation in place for a couple of years specific to Colombia, Panama, Korea. We have tariffs of 20, 15, and 8% respectively that for some reason we can't get past. Every country where we've been able to, with the help of the government, to bring down trade barriers, either economic or non-economic, our sales have doubled in every single country. And so we're perplexed over why you know, we cannot move this kind of legislation forward when there's so much at stake, not only for our company, but for other companies. You know, we have every one of our plants right now today is not working. Every one of our plants is down because of lack of demand, and yet we believe that, you know, we could double our volumes over the next several years in a lot of these different countries if we were able to do the right things. The second thing is the whole idea around taxes and regulations. As an example, and this is my problem, not yours, but this quarter our effective tax rate for our corporation will be 59%. Now, how can you live, how can you operate, how can you create jobs in an environment where you have 59% effective tax rate? Now, granted, that's part of that state, part of that's federal, but there's so many hands in the pocket that it makes it impossible to be competitive, which really sort of brings me to my last point, which is more of a macroeconomic perspective. And the real issue in my mind is, I mean, I know that it's easy to focus on any one of these specific areas, but you know, when you have a quality issue, you always have to get at the root cause. You always have to figure out what is the root cause that's causing the quality issue. And in my mind, I would just question how far we've actually moved away from the free enterprise system in our country. How many more taxes are going to be put on both individuals and companies as a burden, which are going to continue to make us being competitive impossible as the global environment, you know, settles into some state of equilibrium. So that would be my comment on that.
Thank you. My name is Ed Hill. I'm the president of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers. I represent 750,000 members and their families. We're down from a little over 1 million, all 300,000 or so jobs that we've lost were in manufacturing. So I have a pretty good stake at why I'm here. I have a very narrow thought on all of this because I don't have one person working in China or Mexico or any place else in the world. They're all right here. And we heard about training, we spend $30 million a year in our various local unions around the country, training for the future, picking up every bit of innovation that we can possibly do. And I want to take a moment to thank Dan over there for the use of his electricity. Can you ramp it up just a little bit? I really appreciate it. The only thing that I would add to what everyone else has said is that you know, we're there. We're really to put our shoulder to the wheel, if you will, but we need to have the wheel, and you all are going to have to be there for it. We're there to work with you. We're there to help you train. We're there to provide the people to do the work. We're there to, and all the green jobs that we talk about, they can be good green jobs. They can be good paying jobs. They don't have to be products brought into this country. as someone mentioned a few minutes ago about the wind turbines. I think that we recently was approached about investing, which we have a lot of pension money that we do invest in this country, and we do invest in companies, about investing in a solar panel group. Our advisors told us that we can't. Not necessarily we can't, but we'd be putting pension money at risk because our competition is all China, if you will. And one of the things that I question is the domestic content in some of our stimulus packages. And I believe that that would go a long way in putting people like ourselves to be able to invest in local manufacturing. So other than that, I am really pleased to be here, so I can at least go back and tell our membership that there is hope here. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. It's not the train coming through it either. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ed. I'm Bob Keegan, CEO and Chairman of the Goodyear Tire Company, and Larry, if I'm correct, I'm your last guest to speak, so I'll try to be brief. I wanted to say appreciate the passion and commitment of the group, because sitting at this end of the table as opposed to David, your end of the table, I did learn a lot about your passion and common interest that we have. We're a $20 billion company, 70,000 employees approximately, about 40,000 of those in the U.S., 16,000 manufacturing employees in the U.S. in 20 plants. We are committed to manufacturing in the United States. And I've got to say that most of you either drove here one way or another on our tires today, or your family did, or the products that your family is going to consume were delivered in part of the transportation system on our tires, and we're proud of that. One thing I wanted to mention, today, our biggest new product is a family of fuel-efficient tires. And I don't think people generally think of us as an energy conservation type of company, but we can save you gas. And that technology is frankly just starting to be developed, and we and undoubtedly our foreign-based competitors, remember virtually all of my competitors are foreign-based, they're not American, we'll be developing that technology. So we're anxious, the consumer loves the product, fastest selling new product in our history. And you can save gas is the value proposition to the consumer. As a result of that, I'll just mention a couple things. I can only agree with some of the general comments that have been made. I'll try to tell you our perspective relative to these. Education, innovation go hand in hand. We're proud of the fact that our tires today are packed with new technology coming out of our chemistry and our physics, and frankly our mathematical modeling and the ability there to do mathematical projections and simulations. So we're proud of the technology in our product. I say we're still the strongest company in the world in the technology area. We're the strongest company in the world in innovation. Our problem is that our trajectory isn't keeping pace with other parts of the world. They're gaining on us. Their trajectory of improvement is significant, and at this point, we're struggling to keep up with that, and we have to. That would be my point number one. Point number two, I mentioned my competitors are all foreign-based. I've spent 13 years of my life living outside the U.S. I know how the game is played, and we need a level playing field, and whether that's our position in terms of the U.S. dollar or trade policy and trade agreements, we need a level playing field. We don't particularly feel we have that today. So we're willing to spend time and our commitment and our energy working with you on that. I think at times we can overstate, at other times we can understate how important the government is here in setting incentives. And whether those are taxes or credits, the capability you have to set the right incentives for our economy is significant. In our company, we really like to see those incentives in the area of R&D and capital expenditures. Those are critical for us. It's been mentioned earlier, but I think they're probably critical for everyone around the table. But this area of setting the right incentives, absolutely critical for us. My last point is we've got to be cost competitive. I don't have a choice. I'm competing against people that feel that day in and day out. As a result, I do with the people in our company. And I'd mention long term, that can even be related to access to private capital. I think about why is private capital not readily accessible? And part of that may be the macroeconomic environment short term, but at times they don't feel we're cost competitive. If you have a large manufacturing base in the U.S., Private capital doesn't always see that as an advantage. In fact, in many cases, they see that as a disadvantage. And I'll echo the comments of some other people here just saying, you know, we have to be cost competitive. And so anything we can do collectively to make that happen works for us. In the short term, I have one issue, Larry, I've mentioned it to you before, pension funding. We're proud of the fact that we still have a defined benefit pension program in our company. Not many do, and yes, we're moving away from that as well. And with the stock market having hit the lows over the past 18 months or so, pension positions that were fully funded are now unfunded. And major contributions have to be made have to be put in cash into those funds. We all want to do that. The question is, how fast do we do it? And I would say in this area, it makes good economic sense, I think, to smooth that a little bit over a period of years, rather than to have kind of the rapid necessity to fund pensions that we have today. And I would simply say there that we've got a group of people, companies, and union leaders who all feel the same way in this area. So it's just one. I know it's not top of the agenda today, but working, you know, and creating a dialogue with you on that subject, I think will be pretty efficient for all of us going forward. It's something we should do, because when I put cash into that pension fund, I am not putting cash into new products, and I am not putting cash into plants and equipment in the United States. I appreciate the report, the revitalization report, and for those that contributed to it. I think if we can open a dialogue on this manufacturing area that I believe has been given somewhat stepchild treatment in the past. Manufacturing front and center, if we can do that, and the energy of this group today is representative, if we can put it front and center, the Goodyear Tire Company is ready to contribute to that energy. So I just appreciate the invitation. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Took a long time to go around the room, so we're fairly close to the end of our time. I thought what I might do is attempt to summarize some of the major themes that I got out of the discussion. Invite Secretary Locke and Secretary Solis to add anything if they want, and then see if there are any concluding comments. As I expected, I think the group was unanimous in its view about the importance of a strong manufacturing industry to the country's future. One couldn't help but listen to the discussion with an awareness that while we all agreed on the importance of manufacturing, that the needs of different manufacturing companies depended upon their circumstances, their scale, and that there were both similarities and differences in the perspectives that business and labor in manufacturing brought to these questions. I think the one comment that in some ways permeated not everyone's comments, but a very large number, was the reality that at least in manufacturing, the whole thing was about international competition. That there were almost no producers who were simply trying to do well independent of the reality of international competition. So the reality of what was being done in other countries, what the nature of other markets were, what the nature of what other producers trying to sell into our market was really central to the prospects of manufacturing. I came away, and these overlap fairly heavily with the categories in our report, with 5 areas of priority and focus. And I think if we showed progress on all 5 of these, I think almost everyone would agree that we would have made enormous progress. The first was competitiveness and trade. Everybody agreed that if there were fewer barriers to our products abroad, if there were more fairness in the subsidies provided by others abroad when they were selling to our market if macroeconomic conditions, which included currency, permitted us to be increasingly competitive, that that was a very, very important thing. Just how you do it, trade-offs of every kind. Trade agreements usually involve both reducing their trade barriers and reducing ours. There are lots of complexities around. I, as an old Treasury Secretary, know not to get into discussions of exchange rates, so I'm going to stay away from stay away from that one. But the competitiveness and the tilts in the playing field are of overwhelming importance. Second, if we are successful in manufacturing 15 years from now, it is not going to be producing the same products that we're producing today in the same way that we produce them today. It is going to be, given the standards of living that American workers expect, and given the nature of international competition, it is going to be because of our success in innovation. And that requires a base of science and technology. It requires an ability to adapt that base to a commercial application. I was a little bit surprised, probably it reflects a parochial bias coming from my past, that there wasn't a little more emphasis on partnership with our institutions of higher education, which is where I think a certain amount of potential for that innovative pressure innovative pressure could come, but that's what I get for asking for only one thing per person. But I think the whole innovation, and there's a separate paper which we'll send to everybody here, which is around the administration's innovation strategy. We won't succeed without substantial innovation. Third are a set of issues that I labeled here the business climate issues. For some, that was tax questions. Everybody recognizes, everybody recognizes that government needs to be funded. I've had a lot of experience now in government talking to groups, and no one has ever come to me and said that the activity in which they are engaged is currently undertaxed and can prudently and sensibly afford to pay more given the needs of the needs of the country. But I think there are real questions that have to be looked at in terms of fairness, level playing field in the tax structure. There are also questions around regulation, and regulation that may, whether it's wherever the sector is, where regulation in turn implicates the nature of the business climate. And we didn't really quite get into it, but at a more macro level, there's the question, which the President has emphasized a number of times, of the extent to which we want to be an economy oriented to consumption or an economy oriented to production. And being an economy somewhat more oriented to production so as to enable consumption would, I think, be availing for manufacturing. Fourth are a set of issues. Someone spoke of, Shirley, I think, spoke of 4 categories of infrastructure. I wrote the word base down. There's a certain base environment that the country needs in order to succeed. It goes to the training of engineers. It goes to the training of people who work with their hands. It goes to the transportation systems that can move products to ports if you want to export them. It goes to a kind of advisory infrastructure that enables small businesses to be able to export. It goes to a financial infrastructure as well. There needs to be a base that is strongly functional. And fifth, I'll stop here, I heard a number of people who in different ways emphasized what I would call credit and business cycle. There are a set of medium-term and longer-term structural challenges facing manufacturing. There are a set of different challenges that were present in many of the statistics that you all mentioned with respect to your companies, pointing to 20% or 30% declines in output or orders, which have to do with the fact that a financial crisis started in America in 2007, and as a consequence of that, orders collapsed, and as a consequence of that, we have 10% unemployment. And as long as we're in a cyclically depressed economy, we could do all the things that I described so far very, very well, and manufacturers would still be having a lot of trouble. And that's why jobs and economic recovery are priority number one for the president. And as a number of you emphasized, one component of that strategy, particularly for the non-Fortune 500 sector, is greater access to capital markets so as to be able to borrow and lend. I obviously didn't have an opportunity to reference every comment and every specific perspective, and I'm sure I've left some things out. But if we focus on credit and cycle, we focus on the base, that make America an attractive environment to produce. We focus on what public policy is doing to create an attractive and inviting business climate. We focus on technology, and we maintain an acute awareness that it's a hyper-competitive environment and going to become a more competitive environment. I think we will have very substantially enhanced prospects to support American manufacturing. And as the Vice President made clear, that is something that is really central to the President's overall economic strategy. We've lost a lot of jobs. Disproportionately, those jobs have been lost in manufacturing. And healthy recovery is going to depend very, very critically on what happens in manufacturing. Secretary Solis, Secretary Locke, and I, along with Ron and Jared, Will, and Michael, will be reporting to the President and the Vice President on this dialogue, and we very much hope on specific issues, which some were touched on very briefly, some you probably didn't get a chance to make, that you will be in touch with any of us, because it seems to me this is a moment when the broader national interests are very much aligned with your specific interests, and so we very, very much want to be in touch. Hilda or Gary, I don't know if you want to add anything.
I heard a reoccurring theme here, and that was job training and the lack of skilled workforce and the need to really have more access to on-the-job training so it's more relative to what's happening at the work site. And that's something that we are looking at in terms of reformulating the WIA program, the Workforce Investment Act. And as we speak now, some of the training dollars that we have, that we're pushing out, the $500 million that I spoke about earlier in green jobs and renewable energy, we are making some conditions there that we really have community colleges, apprenticeship programs, and other partners, and that includes technical schools and vocational, because there are some good vocational schools that are providing some good work, but also helping to retool them and actually extend the net so that we hit these hard-hit communities that have been, where we find a high number of dislocated workers. So we need to also integrate that, because we are wanting to help those, for lack of a better word, those 15 million people that are out of work. And not many of them have the appropriate skills to come back in if they're out long-term, that we're also faced with another challenge. And I heard an idea, about, I guess over here from Jeffrey, about one area that I know that there's interest to try to keep people on the job while they're maybe at a down period, and helping to look at new ways of designing that, something that I'm sure we'll look at. But overall, we are for getting people back to work. And I can't just underscore how important every month looking at that unemployment rate that is so serious and so devastating to our communities, and the fact that the middle class, and that's what this is about, the middle class task force, is putting people back in a position so they can earn better income, but also provide for their families. And I think the president has gone way out of his way to help provide more incentives for people to have affordability to go to college, to get that training while we're in this downturn. And I think that we want to work with you. We want to work very closely with manufacturers, both big, small, minority-owned, women-owned, and really see how we can help push our agenda all in the same direction. So I thank you for your comments. It was very enlightening for me. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Larry, for moderating this group, and I appreciate everyone taking time out of your very busy schedules and traveling distances to be here and giving us your input. I heard a lot of different themes, and Larry tried to summarize them into 5 various points, but let me just say that on some of these points, we at the Department of Commerce are focusing very hard on these issues, increasing access to foreign markets, removing some of those barriers, because you make such great and manufacture such great products that are highly valued and in great demand around the world, and you face that unlevel playing field as you try to sell those products around the world. So removing those barriers and helping promote and help sell your products is a part of our job at the Department of Commerce. The President, of course, has talked about export control reform, and so that is underway now within the administration, working with the Congress, and also making sure that we always enhance and promote national security, but also recognizing that some of the controls that we have are leftovers from the Cold War regime that don't really make much sense. We're working with the State Department on reforming our visa system so that more people can come to the United States quickly and kick the tires, so to speak, inspect the factories, get to develop your working relationships and buy from America. Because if they can more easily and more quickly obtain a visa to go to competitors in another country, why would they come here to the United States? So these are a lot of things that we are working on. But that level playing field, that access to credit, the President is and the administration is very aware of and focusing on. Finally, a lot of you talked about just predictability and certainty in the business climate, and that's the key to you moving forward. That's why it's so important, I think, that we pass energy policy as quickly as possible. Regardless of, we may have disagreements on what the elements of the energy policy should be, but I've heard from so many companies and the investors saying that they're standing on the sidelines, not willing to move forward until there is that clear energy policy. Without that tax policy, certainty of tax policy, or what the U.S. policy is, why would you develop products going down path A or invest in path A if in fact U.S. policy eventually is path B? So too many of you are just waiting, and that's why we need to have the Congress pass that as quickly as possible. I can tell you that in all my travels to China, the Chinese government is spending something like almost $10 billion a month developing a clean energy sector. Energy efficiency, renewable energy, alternative energy, and they're doing it not just to meet the energy needs of their country. They're doing this to develop clean energy sector to meet the needs of the entire world. So the longer we wait, the farther ahead the Chinese and other countries will be. And pretty soon we're going to wake up and say, how is it in 2 or 3 years that Shanghai or Copenhagen or Berlin have become the Silicon Valley of clean energy with the millions of jobs associated with it, and we don't have that. So we need to support the President and the Congress in terms of quickly developing a clean energy policy, which is also, on terms of predictability and certainty, healthcare, health insurance reform. You guys are all facing those high costs of rising healthcare to cover your employees, and which is why the President has made this his #1 priority. We need that predictability and certainty so that you can all move forward. But all these other discrete issues. There's a lot of activity going on within the administration to address those very key points. And so we know how important they are to your economic success and therefore your prospect of manufacturing and with that good paying jobs in America. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. It's been terrific.